I don't talk about Marvel a lot, but as you can imagine by taking a look at my background, for example, I am a huge fan of the Marvel franchise, specifically a handful of heroes that I can relate to. Those two heroes are Spider Man and the Hulk, and I think if you've been following my online story for any amount of time, you'll understand why. Spider Man's a favorite because I can relate to Spider Man. And no, I don't have the powers of a spider. I'm not a super smart scientist. I'm not super athletic. I don't save people's lives. It's none of the heroic reasons that I relate to Spider Man at all. The same with the Hulk. He's one of my favorite superheroes, and I do relate to the Hulk, but it has nothing really to do with Bruce Banner. I'm not a super smart scientist out to save the world. That's not something I'm capable of doing. Spider Man kind of sucks. He kind of neglects the people that love him in favor of trying to save strangers, and those strangers end up hating him for it. And on top of that, he's got a mouth that just won't quit, that constantly gets him in trouble. The Hulk wants to try to save the world, but actually has the capacity to destroy it, and routinely destroys the lives of himself and the people around him because of the trauma that happened to him in the past. The Hulk definitely sucks. I mean, honestly, when you really look at it, all of the Marvel superheroes have dark pasts that kind of suck, right? Wolverine killed his mom. Iron Man was an alcoholic. In the comic books, Hank Pym beat his wife. And that's without getting into the anti-heroes like Deadpool or the Punisher or Black Widow. I consider her an anti-hero. She was literally a Black Widow. Look it up. To me, and to a lot of people, what makes a superhero interesting isn't the powers they have, or their abilities, or their immortality, or the money that they spend. It's how broken they are, and that's definitely true of some of the world's best superheroes, Marvel or not. When we look outside of the Marvel universe, this is also true. When you take one of the most popular characters of all time, Batman, you look back at his roots and you'll see a goofy, campy character for sure, but his modern interpretation is just what a broken, flawed person he is, and that is when he is at his most interesting. And the most recent Batman movies just continue to make him more broken, more flawed, and more dark, and that's when he's absolutely at his most interesting, and the box office receipts seem to show it. This is something that Marvel got right at the beginning. And I definitely mean the original Sam Raimi movies as well, but everything that came soon after that, the original Iron Man and such. These films definitely gave a deep dive introspective into what made these characters tick, what their hearts and minds were like, their flaws as well as their superpowers, and using their superpowers to help overcome the flaws that make them human. And I think the perfect example of when this is successful is in Spider-Man No Way Home. Because not only did we get to see the current Peter Parker and how broken he actually is, but we got to see that same story play out for two other Peter Parkers, as well as Doctor Strange and every villain in this movie. And if you go back to what you remember about this film, for me, I don't necessarily remember the fight at the Statue of Liberty. I remember those personal moments between villains and Spider-Man, between the Spider-Mans themselves, the moment with Aunt May, all of that tragedy and all of that heartache that they had to overcome and use their superpowers to overcome it. I guess what I'm trying to say here is that the character studies that have been done in these comics and movies and books and shows has always been the most interesting thing. Sure, I like the fights, and sure, I like to see them fight the giant blue laser or the giant purple man, but it's the personal issues that they are facing in the B stories that keep me glued to my seat. Unfortunately for me, I've just not been able to relate to a lot of the characters in the more recent Marvel offerings, and it's mostly because they are less about being characters and more about being caricatures. Namor and Shuri come to mind, Captain Marvel, Miss Marvel. These characters just aren't flawed. There's no humanity in the villains, and there's no villainy in the human heroes. Quantumania is another perfect example. They've got so much to work with when it comes to Ant-Man and Hank Pym and his family. They're such morally gray people who've done some tremendously awful things in the past that they should be dealing with, and instead they're played for laughs. And King the Conqueror is not scary because I don't know what to be scared of. He's basically a blue laser personified, and not in the Loki series. He Who Remains was actually pretty terrifying. He had some very human reasons for doing what he wants to do, but King the Conqueror here is just evil for evil's sake, and it really doesn't make much sense. They did not give that character the depth that he deserves, and I hope they do in further outings. I mean, don't get me wrong. I like watching people fight aliens and destroy giant mechs and save planets as much as the next guy. But it's the reason the person is doing that that is always going to get me to buy a movie ticket. Because let's be honest, if a lot of us had superpowers, we weren't going to risk our lives to save the world with it. You know what we're going to do with it? We're going to create a podcast about it like Ant-Man does. You know you would. Admit it. But we don't have superpowers. We're not paragons of morals. You and I are flawed human beings. And it's those flaws, those broken hearts, those broken minds, those broken souls, and those broken spirits of so many of these heroes that make us love them and relate to them so much. Marvel Cinematic History, I think, proves me to be correct because the most powerful 60 seconds of footage in the entire cinematic history involves two characters who are the most interesting and the most flawed. You had Thanos, who technically was right and thought he was doing a good thing, but was certainly going about it the wrong way. And then you had Tony Stark, Iron Man, a man who'd given up time and time again, who'd walked away when adversity faced him, who chose himself above others, but in the end made the choice to save us all and give up everything. That's Iron Man, baby. Hey, I hope you enjoyed my little Marvel introspective here. I'm trying to get back into Marvel here with Phase 5, but Phase 4 just kind of lost me, and I thought talking about movies a lot lately on the channel, this is something I want to talk about, because I find myself obsessed with these old stories, these old comics, and these older movies way more than the modern stuff, and I hope it gets better. It really needs to. Marvel makes for great popcorn theater, and I have no problem with that. But I do think it can be cinema. I think the Batman was cinema. I think the original Iron Man was pretty close to it. And I think Spider-Man No Way Home is as close to it as you can get. So I hope we get more of that in the future. As always, thanks for watching. I love you very much. And I will speak with you again soon.